We're well over halfway through Revelation now, and the end is definitely nigh. When we move over into chapter 15 and the seven angels, they're described as the seven angels with the seven last plagues. Well, Revelation 14 is a bit like the trailer for what's to come. And now sometimes modern day film trailers are actually called teasers, as their aim is to entice you to watch the film without really giving anything away. But chapter 14 is not a teaser, and it's more like a trailer for a film like Titanic or Dunkirk, where you know what the ending's going to be, and in that sense it's a taster rather than a teaser. As we move into the final scenes of Revelation, there's a lot of judgment and justice required from God. We've seen the extent of the wickedness of society and the evil powers that are behind it, and how God's people have suffered at their hands. We'll shortly discover their God-determined destinies. And in order for there to truly be a new beginning, there must first be a decisive and total ending of the old. So that's basically the plot outline for what's to follow. Back to the trailer. We start with a scene that reminds us of what Revelation is essentially about. The revelation of Jesus the Lamb and the followers of the Lamb. There are connections with the heavenly scenes before, the worship for one. But this scene is not taking place in heaven as such. The scene is the Jewish holy mountain of Mount Zion, on which Jerusalem was built. And within the Old Testament, it was seen as the place on earth where God dwelt. Again, powerful use of Old Testament imagery. The 144,000 represent God's people, or the followers of the Lamb as they are identified in this mini-scene. In fact, the symbolic nature of the 144,000 becomes clearer, as we can now see that when God's people are seen in heaven, they're an innumerable company from every tribe, nation and so on. However, when they're being viewed on earth, they are numbered and named, protected and cared for, each one precious and known to the Father, but yet part of this spiritual army who will be victorious. The 144,000 have not been removed from the earth. The earth is the place of their worship and the setting for their fellowship and communion with the Lamb, but it's also the place of their suffering. There's also the sense that by returning to the 144,000 as the end approaches, God has truly kept them. As Paul so wonderfully puts it, that is why I am suffering as I am. Yet this is no cause for shame, because I know whom I have believed, and I'm convinced that he's able to guard what I have entrusted to him until that day. We've got the image of them being virgins. You mean literally? Nah. The symbolic makes a lot more sense. They're pure. Their devotion is to the Lamb. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. Next on in our trailer are three angels, each presenting a tiny part of the bigger picture. First on, and most important, it's the testifying and the living out of the gospel. The good news is to be preached to everyone in order for the representative 144,000 on earth to be one and the same as the innumerable heavenly crowd from every tribe, language and nation. The second angel introduces a new name, that of the whoring Babylon. Now, we'll in fact treat that as a bit of a teaser, because we've seen or heard nothing of this so far. We'll have to wait a couple of chapters before we properly meet Babylon as such. The third angel recalls stuff that we already know and will become an important part of the ending. The first part of our trailer was about those who were marked and sealed with the name of God and the Lamb. And these stand in contrast to the rest of humanity that we see here, who have the mark of the beast and who belong to another kingdom. They will ultimately have to face God's judgment. Everything is building up to the final cataclysmic scene with the ending of the old on earth, as the final part of our trailer reveals the returning Jesus and portrays the end as two contrasting harvests, one of grain and the other of grapes. Now the grain harvest is about bringing the grain in, but the grapes are to go into the winepress, and that is identified as the place of God's wrath. And again, there is this basic and binary division of humanity with just two possible destinies. And this is exactly what John had spelled out in his gospel, where the most famous verse in the Bible, and the next one, reveals these two destinies. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned. But whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they've not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light, because their deeds were evil.